Hi everybody, welcome to Seneca Studios monthly open studios night. It is February 10th, 2023. Thanks for joining us and tuning in to the broadcast. We're thrilled to host Eric Hansen today for some demonstrations on the flame working and hot glass blowing kind of collaboration process that he's so known for. I want to thank the Texas Commission on the Arts for their support. I want to thank the City of Fort Worth and Arts Fort Worth for their continued support of Seneca Studios. We are a nonprofit dedicated to community. We do all kinds of classes and workshops in glass blowing, flame worked glass, and kiln formed glass. If you're interested, go to our website and you can learn all about the programming that we offer and sign up right there. You're welcome to join us tonight. We'll be here until about 9 o'clock tonight. But if you would like to ask questions, you can do that from home as well. We're manning the chat, so if you'd like to ask some questions, we'll be able to answer them. But thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Seneca Studios. We're going to go into the hot shop. Eric's already out there getting started. He's planning 3 pieces tonight, just so if you're viewing later than today, you can fast forward or back up or move around in this video. He's going to do I think a paperweight with a little clown standing in the sky. He uses a unique vacuum pump technique to remove all the bubbles. We'll learn about that as we go through this first demonstration. And then he's going to blow a large cane vessel, but he's going to use some flame working techniques to kind of influence the pattern. And then I think the third piece will be kind of a signature piece of his. He does these beautiful roses. It's a really unique technique, and they turn out wonderfully. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And if you're interested in what Seneca Studios does, check out our website. I'll be talking throughout the broadcast and give you a little more information, but just wanted to welcome you all and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Clifton.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to take that in a moment and go out here and show you what we've got going on. Thanks, Gene. All right, I'm on the mic and on the camera. So we are in the glass blowing studio. Seneca Studios, as I said, does public programming. Here's our featured artist, Eric Hansen. He's going into the furnace to gather some glass. Like I said, Seneca Studios does a lot here. We offer public programming to anyone interested in coming and trying this for the first time. We offer an extended curriculum if you really want to learn how to do it. The facility is public access, and so for those who know what they're doing, or those who learn here, you can come and rent the studio. We work in the glass blowing process, we work in the flame working process, and also in kiln forming. So I want to introduce a little bit who all's in the room. Eric Hansen is our featured artist. Tatara Siegel, our education outreach coordinator, is here helping out. Kanan Castile is here. Andrew, Gene Fernandez was on the other side of the camera a moment ago, and over there with Kevin McGeehee. And look, Nick Gomez is here as well as David Apendanzio. We do a whole lot around here. And tonight is unique in that we're going to see Eric working out of the furnace with a soft soda lime glass, but we are also going to see him work in front of the torch. He's got a very unique setup. He was talking with the team earlier, and he made this really beautiful little swan in about 5 minutes. Eric's been blowing glass for over 30 years. He comes from a family of glass makers. I think he's 4th generation. So I'll give you a little overview of what you see here. Eric is standing in front of the furnace. The furnace runs at 2100 degrees all day, all night, and inside there is a crucible filled with clear glass. In the glass blowing process, we pull it out of the furnace on the end of steel rods. We use a stainless steel alloy that's a poor conductor, so the heat doesn't travel up the pipe. We certainly also cool the pipe from time to time. So Eric's gathered some clear glass out of the furnace, and he's going to shape that up a little bit on the marver. The marver, spelled M-A-R-V-E-R, historically that was a stone table. Used metal. So he's dropping this hot gather of glass into this device. There's a vacuum pump hooked up to it, and it's removing air and pulling the glass down around the clown that's in there. So you're just going to let that cool, settle down, and set up.
Soft, soft, soft.
Soft glass. Eric is kind of getting used to what we melt here. We melt spruce pine batch, which is a very long glass. It's got a lot of working time. And then we will go to the bench from time to time. And then as we need to, we will reheat things in that very hot oven that you see on the right of the screen. So inside of that little vacuum pump is this little clown. So this clown has now been encapsulated in that fresh gather. There we go. Hey, look at him. Is he juggling? I think he might be juggling some batons. Take me hold that for a second. How did that happen? I dropped the mic. So Eric's process is unique. You don't see very often someone gather soft glass out of the furnace and then bring it to a torch the way he is tonight. You can make some very unique and very intricate designs in this way. The torch that you see him working on is running on oxygen and propane. So that torch can get and achieve very high temperatures. And that allows him to get it really good and hot and to melt in intricate detail without distorting all kinds of things. So he is going to heat up some rods of glass. You can pre-prepare rods of clear and colored glass to then heat up in front of the torch so you can apply them in very interesting and unique and intricate ways. So he's going to add some clear in certain areas to kind of fill in and to give him handles for later. So he's heating up that clear rod in front of the torch, and he's dabbing it in, and he's filling in areas that the glass didn't get pulled into when you use that vacuum pump. So when you work in front of the torch, we typically refer to it as flame-worked glass because he's taking cooled glass and he's heating it up in front of a flame, a very hot flame. Like I said, that torch is running well over 2,500 degrees. He's adding little bits of clear here and there to fill in around the clown. If you were to take this to the reheating oven right away, some of the details of the clown would heat up and they might melt back. Glass, right? What is glass? Glass is an amazing material. It's in every moment of our lives. It's all around us. There's so much happening in glass. I think we truly live in the glass age. I think we take it for granted, you know? It's all around us. We don't think too much about it. So it's one of those unique materials. So Eric, hey Eric,
hey,
yeah, there he is. Yeah.
Thanks for coming and tuning in.
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, Seneca, for the fun.
So Eric's in the reheating oven. He's going to heat that up and melt that all together. And that oven does not have glass in it unless we have it on the end of the pipe, right? So we usually will reheat it in here. That hole's really hot. It's probably running at about 22. And we can roll the glass on the table. We can influence it with lots of metal tools. We sometimes use wooden tools. You can use cork. So he's shaping it and heating it and melting it and evaluating how things have come together. So here's a good example of a piece similar. You can see there's great detail in it, and those flowers and little leaves and stems were placed into that vacuum chamber and then dripped hot glass over it. So you can imagine that the clown that's inside here, here's an example of one that has a clown in it. So that clown is on the end of the pipe. Whoa, sorry about that. And it's kind of in this orientation, spinning around this way. I think he's going to change the axis of that, move it around a little bit, and then he'll add like a blue background so that that clown is kind of floating in the sky. Like I said, we use lots of metal tools, lots of wooden tools. Oh yeah, nice cleaver. So here on the bench, he's got several different metal tools. The ones on the left, the long steel tools, are called the jacks. Then we have the shears, diamond shears, and then he's using a cleaver. Everything's a tool. This pad that you see down here is a newspaper that's been folded up. We keep that wet, and it allows us to have a flexible kind of wooden tool. So, the background of this, like I said, is going to be blue. The furnace is full of clear glass. We start with clear glass in the furnace, and then we can gather and apply color in lots of different ways. So Eric's going to gather out of the furnace some more clear, and then he's going to come over here and he's going to put, I think, some of this blue powder. So we can get we can purchase the color in different forms. We can buy it in these frits, these little broken up bits. We can buy it multicolors. We can buy it milled down into almost like salt, and then even further down like flour or talc. So like I said, we're a public access facility. You can see we got some people who just came in to sit on the bleachers and watch us make. Eric's back to the furnace for another gather. The glass is really soft, and so you can't just go into the furnace and gather, a pound or 2 pounds in the first try. You have to put a little on the end of the pipe and then let that cool off, let the atmosphere cool it. We use the tools to cool it, and then we can go into the furnace and gather more. If you just take that hot, clear glass and you touch it to small particles of really anything, they'll heat up and stick. So Eric has dipped that clear gather into some blue powder, and then he's going to take that back over to the heat and melt it in. All the while, Kanan, who's assisting, is going to kind of babysit the clown. The glass we work with is, like I said, a soft soda lime glass, and it is susceptible to thermal stress. So if it cools down too quickly, it'll crack. And if it cools below about 900, that's when the stress really starts to build. So what Kanan is babysitting needs to stay above 900 degrees. So he's kind of watching it, he's evaluating its temperature, and then when he needs to, he's going back into the heat to heat it up and keep it warm, so to speak. It's a relative term around here. Hot is 1,000 to 2,000 degrees. Cold is about 900 or so. So we work it in the range between about 1,600 and 1,800, 2,000, depending on exactly what we're trying to achieve. In a nutshell, really what we do in this room is process the raw materials into a clear puddle in the furnace. We reach into there and gather it on the end of rods, and then we keep it hot. We keep it balanced. We do our best to understand the temperature and get it to move the way we need it to move to achieve our goals. And then when we're satisfied and we like it, we break it free of the pipe. Put it away into an oven to cool off slow. Like I said before, you can't cool it off too quick or it'll crack. So everything we make has to go into an annealing oven. The annealing oven is nice and cool at about 920 degrees. So Eric's back in the furnace for one more dip. Let that settle down a little bit. Roll it on the table to help control it, even it out. Let's get a little closer and see what he's going to do. So he's gathered, he's got a little extra bit of clear out there on the end. So he's going to use the jacks and he's going to squeeze that down and then reach out with some shears and snip that off. And then in his way, he's going to, came over and he picked up a little bit more color. Picked up a few little bits of frit, these little chips of colored glass. So picked some of those up on the surface. He's going to get that hot and melt it in. And what he has will be the base. He's going to drop that little bit of blue with those little bits of color. Looks like he's going to come over and get a little bit more. See, it just sticks to the surface if you touch it. Because the pieces are so small that they'll heat up rather quickly and stick. If you were to touch the glass, it would burn you, obviously, but you wouldn't stick to it the way that these little bits of color are because you're relatively cold and don't heat up as fast. So if we want things to stick together, we've got to warm them up. That little clown was actually warmed up to about 1,000 degrees before we even put it into this little vacuum pump. Let's see that, Kanan. Let's see that little clown. This is the back side of the clown, so he's facing the other way. So that's his back. And on the other side, he's facing towards the pipe right now, but ultimately that'll be the other side when he spins it around. So ultimately this is going to be a flame working demonstration really, but we're in the glass blowing studio and the final piece will be a paperweight. So he's got that blue hot. Now that blue is pressed against the back of the clown. And the clear that was facing the pipe, that was what he originally, when we first started, now the top. So the top of the paperweight is facing away from him right now. You can see he's got kind of a blue base, a bunch of clear glass hovering over the clown. So I think he'll probably bring it over here to the torch next and heat it up and melt that seam together and clean up. So I started to say it earlier, but I got a little distracted. That sounds typical of me. Seneca Studios is a school, right? We're a nonprofit dedicated to the community. We offer all kinds of public programming, but we also do outreach programming in the community. So if you've wanted to try this, if you've ever wanted to come and learn more about glass making, this is the place. All kinds of great classes in glass blowing, flame worked glass, and kiln formed glass. I haven't really talked about that yet. In kiln forming, we work it in ovens, right? We take sheets of glass, we create design and pattern, and heat it up and melt it, fuse it together. Very different than this process that we're watching now. So Eric's got a really interesting setup here where he's got these two rolling yokes, so he can roll the pipe and then he can move it around and put it in front of the torch. So we can kind of see that blue background. And then I'll come around to this side, see if we can see inside to see that little clown. It's hard to tell what's going on when the torch is really on. That area that was attached to the pipe a moment ago that he broke free, it's got a little scuzz on it. So he's probably going to heat that up, trim it off, clean it up, and then he'll get it all nice and hot. And it'll just become more spherical and round. He'll probably shape it a little bit.
You can see all the scuzz on it.
Yeah.
And my goal is to get every single little piece.
He's talking about the little imperfections on the surface. So he's going to kind of scoop that hot glass off. Get it hot, rake it, pinch it, pull some of that glass off of there. It's just heating the surface so much more than anything else. So the surface is really what's moving and coming off. Yeah, you can see through the top a lot better now. So he's going to clean off a little bit of that scuzz.
Throw some of that water in here.
Yeah, I can see that. I can already see the clown in there more clearly. So he's going all around the surface and heating it thoroughly, and pulling, trimming off, kind of raking across the surface. The surface is so much hotter than the rest because that torch is really, really heating the surface. He's going to go all the way down and around and thoroughly strip and clean off the surface. If he wants to get it hot deep, he'll take it over to the hole and heat it in the hole. He's really being critical and he's looking at every little speck and little piece that he doesn't want on there, pulling it off. See if I can get a view with Eric in it. There we go. So he'll heat it and shape it. We use, like I said, we use metal tools, we use wooden tools, and at times we use graphite. So in his hand, he's got a graphite pad, like a paddle almost. He's using that paddle and he's pressing really hard on it to kind of flatten out the surface. Where he brought together that blue bit and the clear, there was a seam. So he was really heating that seam up. Getting it hot. Showing it to the crowd. Hey, what's up, clown? And then he's going to take that whole thing over to the heat and get it all nice and evenly hot and then shape it nice and round. So this is a really great example of the combination of flame-worked glass and blown glass. You can create very intricate and elegant small things on the torch, and then as we've just seen, we can encapsulate them in a much thicker layer of glass by using a vacuum pump to pull the hot glass around it, and then stacking things up, getting them hot, breaking them, adding them together, and then that last bit there was a really good example of heating the surface really thoroughly and stripping off all of the imperfections and impurities. Now he's got a wooden tool in his hand. This is a wooden block that's been carved into this kind of a spherical form, and we can use it to help coax it into a nice round shape. So Eric will take a couple of trips to and from the reheating oven to get it hot, nice and thorough, through and through, and then keep shaping it up.
So I want to make a shout out to the paperweight
Shout out to the Paperweight Collectors Association of Texas.
Bunch of good folks.
How long you been a member?
Since 1995 or so.
Been a strong member of the Paperweight Collectors Association of Texas and the National Paperweight Associations.
Paperweight Fest at the Wheat Arts in Millville, New Jersey.
Yeah.
This May.
He's gone through an array of great paperweight collectors, conventions, and events. Sounds like he's going to Wheaton Arts this May. His paperweights are pretty sought after. It's well known. So we're thrilled to have him here. Got some flame workers in the house. Randall, Julia, and Nick are all accomplished flame working artists here in North Texas. So now Eric is going to refine and define the area that we will break it free. When it's all said and done, we got to get it off the pipe. So Eric's using this long steel tool we call the jacks to define that line that's going to separate what we get to keep and what he's going to leave on the pipe. So just in heating it and rolling it and shaping it, you can distort things. So you have to be a little careful. Becomes a dance, you know, you got to keep it hot, you got to work it a little bit. You got to keep it hot, influence it with the tools. Gravity's constantly working on it.
Round sphere, crown on this. You can check it by looking at your fluorescent light reflection.
His goal is ultimately a perfectly round, kind of spherical form, with a really smooth top. That layer of clear acts as a lens, so it's important that the surface is nice and smooth. Torch to really make sure that the back section's nice and hot, the hottest part. He'll continue to define that line, and then when he's ready, he'll break it right on that line. And like I said, when it's all said and done, we got to put it away into an oven to cool off slow. So as he closes in on the end of this piece, we will catch it and put it away into an oven. Notice once he got it hot and stripped all the impurities off the surface, he didn't touch it much. He touched it just a little bit with the wooden tool, but after that, he really hasn't wanted to touch it. He's pointing it up on purpose and letting it droop back towards that line. He's kind of squatting back a little bit. He's talking about how best to capture imagery in these things, the profile of the shape and the way that optically enhances things can sometimes hide some of the detail. So he was just saying that the clown was a little tall for the size of this paperweight. Looking straight down on it, he's looking to see the whole image. So he's going to let that cool down. The core is much hotter than the rest, so he's going to try to balance things out before we break it free to put it into the annealing oven to cool off. It's still moving, it's still kind of squatting down back towards the pipe, which is sharpening that connection, that line that defines where he's going to break it. come around and show it to the crowd.
Color will come back. It's pretty cool.
He's talking about the color. The color is pretty deceptive when it's hot. You know, the clear comes out of the furnace looking orange, but it's not orange. It's clear. Let's see this guy. See if I can get a good look at it.
Okay. Kanan's ready. When you're ready, he'll take it from you as a bench. Or I can grab it.
How do you want to fire pulse the bottom?
No, he's gonna cold work it.
Yeah.
You want to do that? He's having to grab it, not walk all over. It's torn.
So, as I said, when it's all said and done, we got to break it free of the pipe. So in this oven, he's going to tap it off. And then it'll cool down nice and slow. All right, we're going to take a little break, and then I'm going to pull Eric into the gallery, and we'll do a quick little interview to give you guys a little bit more information about him and introduce. Nice moves. All right. I'll grab Eric and we'll do a little interview. How you doing?
I'm all right.
All
I don't know
right.
about this stuff.
How's it feel?
This one,
How's it feel to be in a hot shop with a bunch of people staring at you?
It feels good to be in a hot shop with a bunch of other glass blowers. That's
All
fun.
right. Yeah,
I'm
for
enjoying that a
sure.
lot.
Well, Eric, thanks so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. This is your third trip to us, right? You were here like 10 years ago, and then like 4 or 5 years ago.
Which I've completely forgotten.
Well, thanks so much for coming back
Yeah.
and for showing us your technique.
Thanks
It's
for having me.
fantastic work. We've got some great examples of it. But before we move on, I want to just ask you, you know, where's this come from? You know, are you multi-generational? Are you just
My
a
dad and his uncles they went to neon school after World War II, and they all three went to the same class, and they left there and got them into hot glass, making neon signs, and they later turned that into creative tube work, making big swans out of blown tubes off the ribbon burner.
Really?
And that later got them into borosilicate and doing some of the ships and, you know, different novelty glass, it was called back in the day. All the different figurines, angels. My mother did it. A couple of my sisters, my brother, and myself. We had a little business out in California and raised 5 kids.
Really?
And then that led me into. They also dabbled with glass paperweights, and which was soft glass, and so next thing you know, I was taught some soft glass paperweight work from my uncle, one of my uncles. My dad had already passed away, so yeah, and that was in '94, and so I started making glass paperweights, and around that time, and that sort of led me into furnaces, led me into blown work.
Yeah.
And here it is. I'm an old
Well,
man, and
that's-
I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, that's
But
how it
it's-
happens.
Yeah.
That's how it happens. We fall in love and we learn from our family
Yeah.
and our, you know, the culture of it just grabs a hold of you, and the next thing you know, it's 30 years later,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well, and you mentioned earlier when you were working on that piece, but you're a member of the
Paperweight Collectors
Paperweight
Paperweight.
Collectors Association of Texas.
That, and yeah, also the national, which is Paperweight Collectors Association, Inc. And anyway, they're a good bunch of people. We've known each other for 20, 30 years, and there's a whole community out there of wonderful people that collect paperweights. And so about half of my glass work in the last 25 years has been with paperweights.
Yeah.
And then I also really enjoy the blown work, so pretty much lean in that direction,
Yeah.
also. But yeah.
Cool. Well, we're always thrilled when you come in with new work. Brought some new pieces in this last December, and I think we sold several vases and paperweights. And you've brought some more stuff with you for this trip. So we're thrilled to have you. We love your work, and it's
love
great.
you.
It's great to highlight you and to host you for a demonstration. We've got a decent crowd out there, so let's get
Yeah.
back out there and show them the next demonstration.
Great.
But
Thanks,
so
Cliff.
much for being here.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Eric.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Follow y'all in.
Let's get crazy.
Do you want to keep that mic on, or do you
Oh,
want?
no, I'd rather not.
Okay.
Yeah. Where'd it go? There you go. Cool. All right.
Thanks, Gene. It takes a team, as you guys can tell. There's a bunch of people here all working together to make this possible. And Seneca Studios is all about relationships. We're all about bringing people together. The name itself, Seneca Studios, comes from the bringing together of these 3 elements, right? Silica, sodium, and calcium brought together and filled with energy can produce glass, right? If you add a little bit of iron, it turns green. If you add some gold, it turns pink. You add different metals and different minerals, and it changes it a little bit and shows off its array of colors. So they're gonna preheat these canes, right? So there's lots of techniques. As Eric mentioned, he's been working in glass for 30 plus years. People have been blowing glass for thousands of years, really, hundreds and hundreds of years at a very elite level. And so there's lots of ways. There's lots of things you can do. There's lots of different techniques. So this next technique that Eric is going to show is kind of an Italian technique. Certainly they were using canes and they were drawing glass into long rods as far back as the Egyptians. But the Italians have really shown us a way where we can heat these long sticks of colored glass up and roll them around to create really interesting patterns. So Eric's going to take that technique and he's going to create a pretty contemporary looking piece by kind of wiggling those patterns back and forth. So I think he's probably going to gather out of the furnace and blow a bubble, and then he will roll those canes up and then use the torch to heat up certain areas and then twist and kind of tug and push and pull to influence that pattern. So this time he's gathering on a hollow rod. He's gathered some clear glass on this about 4.5 foot long stainless steel blowpipe. He's going to let that kind of cool off. He's just going to wait for a moment and let that cool down, and then he'll gather again. Like I said earlier, this is about working together. I want to thank the team that makes this possible. Jean Fernandez was holding the camera earlier. She is our visiting artist and residencies coordinator. She coordinates with artists all over the country to bring them in for demonstrations, for workshops and master classes, for lectures and exhibitions. Seneca Studios does a lot, and we're thrilled to be a part of the community that we're in. Building relationships to Tara Siegel, who's there talking with Eric now. It's our education and outreach coordinator. She coordinates and manages all of the programming in the community. Kanan has been on the team for over a year, almost 2 years now, teaching classes and helping artists when they're in town. Kevin McGee, he's over there talking with some people who are here watching. Kevin is one of our founding artists. He's my glass brother. We've been working together for, oh my gosh, it's 25 years almost. Started blowing glass together in the late 90s at the University of Texas at Arlington. Big shout out to UTA. UTA is a big part of the glass community here in North Texas. They're their only program in university systems in Texas that offers an undergraduate degree in fine art with a focus in glass and a master's degree in fine arts with a focus in glass. We all come, we all have connections to UTA. So, to get the bubble started, we get it good and warm, and then we blow through the pipe, usually capturing some pressure, and then wait for that pressure to emerge. So Eric got the bubble started. Take a look at this little bubble. You can see his setup. It's got a little bubble in there. You can see the blowpipe, several gathers of clear glass, and then he put a small bubble in there. Everybody does it a little different, so it's always interesting to learn from people who have been doing it for a long time. So, like I said earlier, we can't just simply go into the furnace and get all the material we need in the first shot. We've got to layer it on. So we're going to let this cool down, and then he'll go back to the furnace and gather another little bit of clear glass on top of it, and he'll shape it and maintain balance. Kind of let it cool off. He might go in for another one. We'll see. Another gather out of the furnace. Eric's using a cherry wood block. Use wooden tools, Most of the wood tools we use are made from cherry wood. The cherry wood's got a natural sugars in it. It's got a tight grain. It's very durable. They actually carve those blocks and the wooden tools out of wood that's not been dried, right? If you cut a tree and the wood is still wet and you carve something out of it, when it dries, it'll shrink and it'll distort and it might even crack. So when they make the glass blowing blocks that we use, they will carve them out of a wet piece of wood that's never dried. And when we buy them, they come to us in a bag of water, so they're always wet. And then we keep them wet so that they never shrink or crack or distort. So we use it to help to cool it, to help to balance out the form, also to balance out the temperature. So Eric's checking his measurement. He's going to heat that little, the bubble and the piece that he's carrying now is all clear. He's going to heat it up. He's going to come over. He's going to roll it across those canes. So he took a measurement. He's going to shape it a little bit more. He may blow a little bit more. We'll see how far he wants to push that bubble into that clear before he gathers those canes over it.
Now I'm gonna got it sized right, and I just need the whole piece to get rock hard cold. And that's going to give me some stability. So after I get it rock hard cold, then I'm going to, the inside is really cold, then I'm going to go heat it again, and that way the very
He's describing the way he approaches the rolling up of the cane. He's going to allow the gather that he has to cool off, to really stiffen. He'll let the core of this cool down, and then he'll go and he'll heat just the surface, and the core won't have a chance to heat up. Not yet. And then he'll roll those canes onto the surface that's hot, and the core won't move around because the core will be a little bit colder. So we'll let this cool down.
That's going to eventually be into the base. That'll pick up canes right there. At some point, some of those will go away and some will go with the base. Doing good, Kristen?
Hey man, I'm doing good.
Remember me and Troy, you helped me pop my first bubble.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
How was your snowcation?
It was good. Yeah, it was fine. It wasn't too cold in here.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. I only live like a 5-minute walk from here.
Oh, okay.
So it's easy for me to come check on the building and check on everything. So I was up here every day. So the glass really won't stick when it's cold. And if you try to stick glass that's like 1,000 degrees together, it's not hot enough. It's not kind of sticky, so to speak. So that's why they're heating those up over there. Eric's allowed his to get cold. Now he's going to heat just the surface. But the challenge here is not to stick to the metal plate, because you can see that the metal plate that these canes are sitting on is getting hot. Okay? So if he touches the metal plate, it might stick to it. So he's going to try his best not to touch the metal, only touching the canes. There's 3 different colors there. So I have a bright yellow. The colors are very deceptive when they're hot. So what looks orange is actually a yellow glass. And then there's 2 different values of kind of a purple color. And I think he's gonna leave a gap. He's gonna roll this around, and oftentimes we try to roll it around so that it will touch itself and the pattern will be complete all the way around, but he was talking about leaving a gap so that it will there he goes. Got them all. So now he has that pattern stuck to the surface of that cylinder, and the bubble is still in there. He's going to bring that over to the table and pinch them down on the end and then back to the heat. He's going to go back and forth several times, melting that pattern in. Pushing on it, squeezing those down, pushing the tips down around the tip, squeezing those others off the back. And they cool off. And if you're not careful, they'll break. So you gotta keep it hot. Just gonna shape that and melt that pattern in really well. Using the table to help keep things balanced, straight. And then I anticipate he will bring this whole thing over to the torch. He's going to influence the pattern. Now those colored canes are the same temperature as the clear that they're surrounding. So now he's going to come to the torch. Torch on, and he's going to use several different tools to get things hot, to influence that pattern. Right now, those canes are pretty straight. Right? You can see those canes are all relatively straight. There's still some texture to them. They're not completely melted smooth. So again, the torch is running on oxygen and propane. And he's got that steel rod that he's working there on one end hot, and he's stuck it to the end. And he's going to heat one section of this, and he's going to twist. And he's going to use that second rod that he's attached to create some torque. And he's going to twist, influence that pattern. So it's twisting, it's causing that cane to kind of swirl in one direction. See that pattern is being influenced, twisted. It's really squeezing it firm. Now he's going to heat a different area and let that one cool and probably twist the other direction. Now he's twisting back the opposite direction, so this pattern will kind of wiggle. Twisting in one direction, he's watching it move, he's really looking at the temperature. We evaluate the temperature based on color, based on how it's moving, and then based on our experience. So you can see that pattern was going one direction, and now it's going back the other direction. Bottom and maybe twist again or just remove it. There it goes. Now we got it off of there. So by using and isolating the heat in that way, he was able to really influence and twist the pattern one direction and then back the other way. So that little handle that he used was unique to him. I don't think I've seen anybody take a hot rod and just jab it into the bottom of some soft glass like that to use it as a handle. But it seemed to work. It held on to it, didn't come off, and then it came off really easy. You know, sometimes we'll shape the glass down and we'll make a little knob on the end that we can grab a hold of with some shears. But then we have to kind of knock that free. I think he'll probably ultimately will do that. He's probably going to take and define.
Still going to add some more reverse twist on the very end as I cut that end off.
You can see that pattern kind of wiggles back and forth a little bit. So he was saying he's going to do one more little bit of twisting on the pattern once he sits down. He's going to squeeze and define a little knob on the end to refine the pattern so that the pattern comes down to a nice, even twist just to a very point. So he's getting the end of it hot. He's going to use the table to help shape it a little bit. Can grab it, kind of pull on it, kind of get that pattern to all come down into one spot. You can grab a hold of it with the shears, kind of pull on it. Do you want that out? Yes, please. Dropped a little bit in the bucket. So in making those canes, they're gathered from the furnace. A lot of the things that he does builds on other techniques. And so those canes that he rolled up, he had already pre-made. He didn't just buy them. He gathered those colors and he pulled them
Not really.
Pulled them out into a long cane. You can gather glass and you can shape it up, applying color in lots of different ways, and then ultimately attach a second pipe to it while it's hot. You can draw them out very long into long 20, 30, 60, 100-foot canes of glass, and then take those long sticks and break them up. So that's where those yellow and purple canes came from. There's lots of different kinds of cane. Like I said, people have been doing this at an elite level for a long time. So just a single cane has a specific name. There's a Latticino and a Reticello, Valentini. There's all kinds of interesting terms that refer to cane patterns and the way that you might create individual canes or the way that you might apply them on top of one another to create interesting cross sections and intersections of lines. So and Eric's now going to just get it all nice and warm. He's probably going to push that bubble in a little further. The table is still influencing the pattern. He's kind of peeling out at times and pushing on the table in certain ways to influence the way that that pressure is going to push and twist. So many subtle things happen in here. The way we swing around and the way we move is ultimately reflected in our final work. And every bit of a tool can influence the pattern. Just the speed that you turn the pipe can influence the way that things move and twist. It takes a long time to really understand how it heats up and cools down and how to isolate the heat where you want it, when you need it there. So just going to use that wooden block again to kind of squeeze and compress the pattern and get it back to that nice, balanced, kind of teardrop looking shape. You're going to put another gather on it?
Yeah.
Then he's going to let it cool and go back to the furnace and gather another bit of clear glass on top of what he's got. If you look at the work in our gallery, and really most glass work that's been blown is mostly clear, right? It's the majority of the material you're looking at is clear glass. There's probably a veil of color trapped inside some way, or multiple layers of color trapped between gathers out of the furnace. So if you think about this piece, he gathered 3 times out of the furnace, shaped it up, and then he applied those canes to the surface of those 3 gathers, and now he's shaped it, melted it all together, defining the pattern that will be blown and stretched and diffused further and further through the process. He could blow this into a pretty good sized piece, but by going back to the furnace again, he'll have more mass. And he can blow and stretch it further and make it bigger without it getting too thin.
Ready for another gather?
So he's showing that pattern off, and he's going to give it some time to cool down and go back to the furnace and get another gather of clear on top of what he's carrying now. He calls these pieces illusion vases because as you walk through, they kind of move the pattern and creates this illusion. Cool down a little bit more and then gather again on top.
This is where we have my coverage on. Okay. So as far as like blowholes.
So he's really communicating with Kanan, who's going to be helping him through the rest of this process, trying to talk through his comfort level. He usually works by himself. He works usually by himself, and so he's got a lot of experience working by himself. So before we got started today, he came in and we blew a kind of a test piece earlier to kind of talk about how to need help and how to to utilize the additional resources. So the furnace he's gathering out of is running at 2100 degrees, and when it's full, it holds about 400 pounds of clear. It's a good sized furnace. But as you can imagine, the more we go in and out of there and gather glass on top of what we're adding to, the level of that puddle decreases. So throughout the week, we have less and less glass in the furnace, and on the weekends, on Sundays, we fill it back up. We charge it with the raw materials. The colored glass we purchase. We purchase colored glass in those different forms, a powder form or a frit form or a rod or a big chunk. But the clear glass we purchase in its raw state. It's not glass yet. It's just the recipe of the soda lime glass that Seneca Studios really represents, silica, sodium, and calcium. We process that raw material at 2300 degrees for about 8 hours, and at that point it's really kind of bubbly. It's kind of frothy for a moment. It's very interesting. It's kind of like perfectly white lava. And then we let that cool a little bit down to about 2000 degrees for 6 or 7 hours. And as it cools, it shrinks. And as it's shrinking, it's squeezing those bubbles. Some of those bubbles rise and pop. Some of the teensy tiny bubbles will actually get squeezed and pressed into the molecule and disappear visually. The molecule, if you examine glass, is wild. Glass is an amorphous solid. It's not crystalline. It doesn't have the same molecular structure as pure quartz, which is just pure silica. It has the look of a liquid compares to water or other liquids at a molecular level, even though it's not moving visually. But when it's hot and gooey. We like it hot. So we've gathered some clear glass over that, shaped it up, cooled it a bit. It's going to take and drive the heat deep. Right now the core is a little cooler than the surface. So we're going to balance out the temperatures by adding heat in different places in different ways. You can really isolate the heat with that hot torch that's in his hand, similar to a flame working torch because it's running on oxygen and propane. And then he'll take it to the reheating hole, get it hot through and through, and then come out and start to add air and blow through the pipe. And his breath will push on the inside. He'll touch it on the outside and push on it with tools or the table. So really it's this amorphous solid that we maintain balance, understand temperature, and then we just scooch it around, right? We push on it from the inside with our breath, with the pressures we create, on the outside with different tools. We let gravity help us to balance things or to stretch things longer, to squish things shorter. So the blow hose. So Eric's going to blow for himself. He's going to shape it and cool it, and in his mouth he's got a little blow hose, and that hose. Oh! Did you touch it? Cannon, we've got one made. T. So we use metal tools, we use wooden tools, and then we use paper tools from time. So this paper, the one he brought with him, is a bit thin. one we've just pulled out is a bit thicker. I think his finger pushed through the paper, touched the glass. So now he's blowing through the hose, which in turn is pushing the air through the pipe. He's cooling it and shaping it from the outside, and that bubble slowly creating a bigger and bigger form. He's going to keep it hot. He's going to probably stretch that bubble out a little taller. And ultimately, the things that we make while we're working on them, especially at this point, are really stuck to the pipe. They're not just going to fall on the floor. So we've got to define an area where we can break it free of the pipe. So as it continues to grow and extend, he's going to need to define and create a place to break it free. Be a little different perspective. See that bubble's getting bigger. Sorry, I'm just narrating, Eric. So the part that he's hitting with the torch right now, the part that's closest to the pipe, will ultimately be the lip of this vase, will be the top of the vase. So where he's touching it now will be the area that breaks free. We've got to define that line that separates what we get to keep, which is on this side of that line, and what stays attached to the pipe. Can't use it all. So he's going to heat that one area, let it stretch a little bit more, and then squeeze and define that line that ultimately will break. Dance, right? We've got to keep it hot, work it to the bench. And then as things get bigger, the hole that we go into to keep it hot needs to get bigger with it. So it's going to let gravity help, even using a little centrifugal force to swing it. Jacks to define that line. See the pattern pretty well now as it gets bigger. The colors we use are very dense. They're very, very rich. You can stretch them a long way, like a red balloon stretches and gets pink. These colors that we use can stretch quite a bit without really diffusing or getting more faint. Switch, sure. Yep. So I'd say this piece is past the halfway point, right? Gathered the clear, he applied the color, he influenced that pattern, added more clear. Now he's stretching it and blowing it, and defining parts of it.
some.
Kanan's blowing for him. Kanan's over here blowing through the hose while Eric cools it, shapes it. And then back to the heat.
All right, guys. This is Jean. I'm going to take over for maybe about an hour or so of this demo, narrating for you guys. So those of you who are catching us or tuning in for the first time in a while, this is Eric Hansen. He works out in Weatherford at his own studio, and we're super lucky to have him up here tonight working with us. Now, Eric made a paperweight a little bit earlier, but he's working on this cool wigwag pattern base at the moment. And one cool thing about this is that Eric is used to working by himself at his own studio, and we've sort of thrown him into having a team here at our studio. So I haven't been listening to the live stream, but I'm going to walk you guys through what's been going on. We started this vessel with a cane pattern, and for those of you who don't know, cane is stripes of glass color. And so Eric's pulled these pieces of cane into kind of like they're lines of color, and then he has rolled it up onto a bubble. Now this bubble is going to be shaped and stretched with heat, gravity, into a vessel form. But you'll notice that as we look at this cane pattern, the lines are not straight anymore. They've been torqued into these wiggled patterns. And so Eric's part of his process is working on a torch setup as well. And so Eric has taken that pattern and he has torqued it and twisted it into what we call a wigwag. It's kind of nice. It's a little bit different from having just a striped vessel. Even though you start with stripes, you can manipulate the color to be a little more organic. I don't know exactly what form Eric is going for, but I guess we're going to find out together. So I'm going to tell you a little bit, while we watch Eric work, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Seneca Studios. If this is the first time you guys are joining us, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and we're here to educate you guys about glass. So we hold tons of classes, but we also do really cool free demonstrations like this. This one might actually be one of our last live broadcast demonstrations. So I'm glad you guys are with us to watch this. So for us, it's all about teaching the public about glassmaking, which is super varied. Eric works in the hot shop, or the glass blowing studio, but he also works on a torch. So for those of you who have taken classes with us, you'll know that glass blowing tends to be a little bit larger scale, but flame working is another process you can learn. We teach flame working in borosilicate as well as a soft glass. And so those of you bead makers out there who want to learn how to make glass beads, if you want to come by, take a class with us, we've got tons of classes on bead making. We've also got tons of classes with borosilicate. So if you wanted to try some glass sculpture on a torch, come take a class with Nick. He's a fantastic teacher. I know some of you out there who have taken a class with him will agree with that. But maybe the torch isn't your jam. Maybe you want to take a class in the glass blowing studio and do something like what Eric is doing here. The best classes to take are going to be, if you're just starting out, the best classes are going to be a bit more class. But you can also do this for a living or for a serious hobby. So you're going to find tons of information about that on our website. If you go to Seneca.org and click on classes in our top menu. Now maybe heat isn't your thing and you want to come and hang out and cut glass and work with glass while it's cold. The kiln forming studio might be the studio you want to play in. Regardless of what you're interested in, we got a place for you at Seneca Studios. So what's pretty fun is we've thrown Eric into not only a team dynamic, but a team that he doesn't usually work with. As we go through this broadcast, you're going to see that glass blowing tends to be a team sport. A lot of people like to work with others in the studio. But for someone like Eric, he's used to working by himself. So there may be a little bit of awkwardness once an assistant gets involved, but hopefully we're making things more efficient for him in the studio. So as Mark is working today, you're going to see him use a bunch of different tools. I'm going to talk about them as we go, so hopefully give you an idea. All right, so Eric is equalizing the temperature right now. We're seeing him use the paddle to give this vessel a little bit of a flat bottom. This is the area that the vessel will sit on. Whoop. So we're equalizing the temperature by flashing doing what we call a flash in the reheating chamber. Eric might be doing a little bit of reshaping, but I think his primary goal at this point is to maintain a nice, even temperature.
Switch over onto honey and then we'll top of the piece.
All right. So the next step in a piece like this is to transfer it. You can see that Tatara is preparing what we call a punty, which is a little bit of glass that is rolled across the marber into something like a Q-tip shape. Now this punty is going to attach to the bottom of the vessel in order to transfer it. Super important that the temperature of this is not too hot and not too cold. If it's too hot, it'll move around a little too much, and if it is too cold, it can break away prematurely. So Tatara is chilling it out and then offering it up to Eric to stick to the bottom of his vessel. Very carefully, Eric will center the vessel on that punty to get it as nice and centered as possible. And then with a little bit of water to thermal shock the vessel, it breaks free from the original pipe. Tatara will give the vessel a little bit of heat, and we've introduced a little bit of a cold spot in the vessel. We've got to make sure that that doesn't crack. So we're equalizing the heat, adding a little bit of heat to that cold area. And from here, we can manipulate the top of the vessel into whatever shape we want. Right. So, all glass vessels start as a closed bubble. You saw that we transferred the vessel to a punty, and that's going to allow us to reshape the top of the vessel into whatever shape that Eric wants to go for. So a lot of the time when artists are working on glass pieces, you'll see them use gravity, you'll see them use air pressure and heat to create their shapes. So Eric is heating up the area that he wants to move. And he's going to use a set of tweezers to pull the lip out. This is going to do two things. It's going to stretch that lip, and it's going to thin the material a little bit. Refine the top of the vessel a little bit. So you'll notice that as Eric is heating the vessel, he's heating the top portion of it where he wants it to move. Glassmakers are kind of like wizards, and they are very, very good at specifically controlling what they want to control. So Eric's using the jacks, which are these really cool double-bladed tool, to create a little bit of a constriction. And he's going to use that constriction to potentially pull the top of the vessel a little bit further, or he might knock it off. All of those tweezer marks that he created, he's got to get rid of them somehow, and that little constriction and that break off are a great way to remove all of those little tweezer marks. So at this point, that constriction has made the usability of this vessel kind of low because we've created a very, very small hole. So he might end up opening this vessel up a little bit further, changing the shape of the top of the vessel. Eric is using what we call a soffietta to blow into the top of the vessel. Once a vessel is on the puntee, this is pretty much the only way to inflate the vessel, is to use that puffer tool. So we're adding heat to the top of the piece, exactly where Eric wants to change the shape. You'll notice that he heated the puntee a little bit with the torch. That's to make sure the glass doesn't crack. I mentioned earlier glass makers are kind of like wizards. They've got to manage a bunch of different things, and so Eric has got to make sure that that puntee doesn't get too cold. But he's got to get another part of the glass hot enough to move. Too cold and the glass will end up cracking. Too hot and the glass will get out of control. And so maintenance of temperature is super important. Right. Eric is going in to inflate the shoulder of this vessel a little further, giving it a little puff. Then he's going to heat it up before he manipulates the shape further. You'll notice that glassmakers are constantly having to reheat their forms to change the shape. He's got to make sure that that glass doesn't get too cold, but also that he kind of maintains the temperature of the vessel. So very similar to ceramicist works with clay. They have to keep the material wet as they're shaping and changing the shape of it. Glassmakers have to reheat or add heat back into their work as they're working on their piece. So you'll notice that Tatara now is suited up. She's got some protective gear on. Eric is doing some final shaping moves. And then in general, glass needs to cool very, very slow. And so Eric's putting a little bit of water on that punty to take it off the punty. Tatara's ready with some heat-proof gear. Ooh. I'm gonna take another flash and do that again. The water that they're adding to the punty is there to thermal shock the glass. They've got to heat it and put a little bit of cool water in that constriction to separate it from the punty. So Tatara's got to have that heat-proof gear so she can catch that vessel. The glass has got to cool down real slow or it's going to crack if we leave it out at room temperature. So we got to take it off the punty. And then we're going to put it away in what we call an annealer. So Eric's adding a little bit of water to that punty to get it to crack away from the punty in a controlled manner. There we go. He's going to fire polish the bottom a little bit to smooth out any rough spots. And then we're going to follow Tatara to the annealer. This piece is going into a 900-degree oven, and it will slowly cool down to room temperature. All right. Very awesome. So we're going to give Eric a chance to cool down. We'll give the team a chance to cool off, and we'll pick this up in about 5 minutes.
Have any questions, feel free to ask anybody that's got Seneca written on them. Check out the gallery. Glass is a really unique thing. It's transformed humanity in many instances. You know, it helps us to see, it enhances our vision. It helps us to see the stars. It helped us to learn about our universe. It helped us to see the smallest of things and help to inform us about science. It's a magical thing that it's transformed us. It's changed us psychologically. And it goes back so far into history that you can see these moments where the glass really changed us. The experience of working with glass is truly inspiring. For me, a very rewarding process. It forces you to be in the moment. Your world fades away and all distractions are gone, and you have this freedom to express yourself once you learn the material, to be yourself and to be free in the moment.
I think that glass has characteristics that other materials don't. And from narrative perspectives, you can take glass and do things with it that you can't in other creative areas. And it becomes this object for self-reflection. It becomes this object for fragility. It becomes this object that you can kind of transpose all these ideas and all these concepts.
The excitement that people bring in and bring out is honestly, I think, kind of what keeps us going, because it's an awesome material to play with. So being able to bring that enthusiasm out of somebody is really fantastic.
A lot of people come into Seneca and say that they are coming here because they want to get away from what they do in their daily lives. And so I think art is somewhat of an escape for a lot of people. Like, I think that's a big reason why Seneca makes a difference to people.
Because glass is such a unique material and it has such potential to transform, you know, in a lot of ways. And so the organization filled a very big hole in our community and in our region, really, because there was no access. There was no place for people to come and make glass. So the nonprofit was born out of the need for accessible, affordable places for artists to work. And, you know, it grew rapidly into a place for programming to take place with partners to help people. So often our programming relies on one another. And so when we rely on one another, there's that communication component, there's that trust component. And I think that a material that's so hands-on, that requires a community working together, has a very powerful therapeutic outcome.
Glass is perfect for kids because they're so curious about the material. And so they come to it with that curiosity that they bring to the world. And there's this discovery of not only the material itself, but also the science behind it.
We've done programming in health and wellness with One Safe Place, with Project Success and the Presbyterian Night Shelter and the Art Station. We've done programming in education with the Fort Worth ISD, with private schools, with the JJELP program within the Fort Worth ISD. We've done programming with a lot of great partners, and we look forward to expanding that.
When I teach people how to utilize this medium for self-expression, I don't tell them how to do it. I simply guide them in what they already know, right? So if somebody feels, you know, broken somewhere inside, then I say, hey, you know, glass breaks. Why don't we go make something and let's just break it?
You know, I'd like people to know that we're more than just a glass-making studio. We reach into our community, and in these partnerships that we can enhance their lives, we can enhance community. I'd like people to know that we do much more than make things, but we make a difference. The resources needed to be ready for the next phase and to implement the programming we've outlined is so important. We truly need more support financially.
Part of what you pay to take a class
pays a little bit for our programming toward people who can't afford it, but also donating money, donating your time too, volunteering here. All those can be helpful.
If we don't have the staff to make it work, this doesn't exist, quite honestly.
The only thing that's holding us back right now is money. In order to grow our building, grow our team, grow our programming, that is the only thing right now that's holding us back.
This is a city that is full of culture, and it was void of glass. So I felt compelled, as the founders all did, to help elevate in our community, the community we grew up in, what we have found to be so important to us. And so often, being creative and being expressive helps us through challenge. And that, I think, creates these unique moments of opportunity for us to express ourselves, to make, to heal. And so through all that we've been through, what Seneca offers, what Seneca is uniquely positioned to bring to the community, is incredibly valuable.
I don't know how I would even price that. I got to figure it out first, you know. And then fixing to actually get on DTA's payroll. Working with Jeremy, we finally got the 80 grit working, but the shaft is like warped, like a little tiny bit, like a tenth of a degree. So it still like shakes, but it runs way smoother. It's way better. So I gotta clean that, go in new grit, and then Tuesday, I'm gonna fix the 120, and then we should be good. And then Monday, I gotta go to the Amon Carter Museum and help Justin all day, so get that out. Which working with him has been crazy. I didn't bring any business cards. Maybe they're in my. That's stupid.
Are you related?
Oh yeah, my dad.
It's your dad. So do y'all do this too?
No, not really. I mean, I've dabbled.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to make it my career and stuff like that.
It's beer money. Are you in college?
No, I'm 28, so
Oh, so you're out of college.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I've been living in Dallas for the past 5 years. So it's like,
That's good to me.
kind of
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they're
it
not
was hard to go visit us, whatever. I mean,
I'm gonna bring it down a little
but
bit.
now I'm in Fort Worth, so.
It's good to be around family.
Yeah,
I'm fascinated with it all and always have been.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I definitely. I've always been prejudiced, have like a bad appreciation.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I've usually been the helper.
Good job.
Yeah.
That was good. All right. See how this goes. It's really boring the first part.
We got beer here and I don't drink anymore. So
I need a hydrate.
All right. I think we are getting ready to get started. Eric, what's the next piece that you're planning on working on? Is it it's a paperweight or it's that thick bowl?
I'm gonna basically build what would normally be a paperweight, but I'm gonna do it on a blowpipe.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna start, but I'm gonna try to keep it real thick on the bottom.
All right.
And so you kind of get a little double image. That'll all be ground away on when it's cold work.
Okay. Awesome. So I love this thing about thick glass where you have that double.
Yeah,
that's triple.
That's my goal is to keep that because
Yeah.
otherwise it just becomes, I mean, I made some stemless wine glasses with this technique and kept it real thick, and it's real pretty, especially with like a Chardonnay or something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. And then the leaf's going to come around the back side. No. Actually, yeah. But you put that in the liquor store is right there.
All right. So we're gonna get started with that demo. In case you missed the first couple of hours of this demo, this broadcast should be recorded live. You should be able to review it once we are done broadcasting. So feel free to come back and check that out later.
Which glasses do you recommend?
So you guys don't forget as you're watching tonight, if you would like to come try this or try working with glass, we are your local nonprofit public access studio in Fort Worth, the only one in Fort Worth at the moment. And so if you're thinking about coming and playing and you're close to Fort Worth, Texas, come hang out with us and we'll teach you how to make some glass.
We gotta get that
So Eric and Tatara are talking about their next steps with this demonstration. And if you've never been to one of our open studio nights before, highly, highly recommend coming and hanging out with us. We do this on the second Friday of every month. And it's pretty nice to come hang out.
Really good.
We've got the doors down tonight because it's a little chilly out, but once the weather gets nice, we will have the bleachers set out. And you can come hang out and watch. So we should be live streaming this demo for about 1 more hour tonight. So if you're nearby, if you're down the street, feel free to come hang out in person. If you've never worked in the glassblowing studio, this is kind of an amazing place to be on a cold night like tonight. Our furnace is kept at about 2100 degrees pretty much all the time. So we keep clear glass in this unit right here, which is the heart of almost every glassblowing facility. It makes it easier to gather clear glass. So the furnace is usually where a piece starts. We use these units called reheating chambers to heat and keep the pieces warm as we work. Anytime you want to change the shape of glass, you got to give it a little bit of heat. So that's where these reheating chambers come in. A lot of the time people ask us how we apply color to the surface of the glass. Now, Eric's been working with a little bit of color tonight, but he hasn't really tucked into this frit yet. He might use some on his next piece, but glass comes in crushed up bits like this, or it might come in big old bars of color. But when glass is hot, it gets sticky. And so when the glass comes out of the furnace, the surface is kind of sticky because it's hot. So when we stick it in to cold glass, it picks up all that cold glass. You can see here a few different grades of glass powder right here in this right scoop, and then bigger chunks of glass in there. So Eric's starting out his final piece of this evening with a little blob of 2100 degree molten lava. The glass, like I said, is clear when it comes out of the furnace, but as you guys can see, it doesn't quite look clear, right? It's got this yellow, orange glow to it. And so what that does is it tends to impact the color while it's hot. So we could start and change the color of this, but heat really changes the appearance of the color. So most of the time when a glassmaker is working, it's very hard to tell what that color looks like until the very end once it's cooled down to room temperature. So you'll notice as Eric is working, his hands are constantly turning. Glass is super sensitive to gravity taking over. As we say, it's a glassmaker's best friend, but also could be your worst enemy. So Eric has to keep his hand turning the pipe at all times if he wants the glass to stay on that pipe. You'll see that he's using a block, which is made out of fruit wood, to shape the glass into a Q-tip shape. And then this gives it a really, really nice shape to start blowing into it. Most glassmakers will start with this Q-tip shape. It's a nice basic shape to start any form with. So Eric's giving this piece a little bit of air. You'll see as he traps air in there, we'll hopefully get a bubble coming out through the end. right there. So glassmakers work with a variety of tools, right? As you guys have been seeing as we've been watching this live broadcast together. The tool that is in Eric's hands right now is called blowpipe. And it's hollow, so it allows for the glassmaker to blow air through and into the glass. Glassmakers also work with solid rods of steel called punties. But generally you can't blow air through those, so you're working solid when you're working on those rods of steel. One of the best things about this whole process is how mesmerizing it is. So if I trail off while I watch, just know it's just because I'm mesmerized by this process. Eric is using the marber to cool the glass as well as shape it. Now we talked about this earlier, right? Anytime you touch a tool to the glass, you're stealing away heat. So you'll see that almost every time that Eric uses a tool against the glass, chills it out, he's going to go back in for a reheat.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick up powder and grit. Okay. This part's kind of boring. Takes about 10 minutes to put a nice layer of red and ruby red and white on the bottom of this. Then I'm going to, this is known as a crimp, and it's a rose pattern. And I'm gonna push this spins up into the glass and push the color I'm going to place on the bottom, and then I'll form a rose out of it.
So Eric is talking to the crowd about how he's going to be working on this next piece. He did say that he is going to put a little color on the end there, and then he's going to use this super cool rose stamp to push the color in. So he's going to add those colors to the glass. And then we're going to see him use that rose stamp to push that rose in to the glass. Now Eric has said that he's planning on keeping this glass a little bit thick. One of the cool things about the process that he's doing right now is he's going to be blowing a vessel, but the goal is to keep it thick in order to create some sort of mirroring effect inside. Now glass optics are pretty amazing, and whenever you have thick glass, each surface of the glass tends to mirror the image that sits on the inside. So Eric's using a little bit of pink frit, which is super finely crushed. And he might use a little bit of that white for a little bit of a color variation. But you'll notice that he's taking a little bit of heat every time that he picks up color. The crushed color is cold, and in order for the glass to stick to it, the glass has got to be nice and toasty. So by rolling the glass on the marber table, Eric's able to keep that material in control. He's still got that bubble in there, but he's kept it kind of small so it doesn't distort.
It's just been trial and error to figure out how much. It's pretty.
What type of white is that?
What's that?
What type of white is that? Opal?
So Eric said that color is red, not pink, which Even though it looks pink, it might change as it heats to a red color. He's adding on a little bit of white for a little bit of color variation. And yes, folks, color application sometimes is a very, very lengthy process. So if you've been hanging out on this live stream, you saw that Eric picked up cane earlier, which are those rods of color. What you didn't see was all of the prep work that went into that. So generally canes start with a very thick rod of glass. We coat that rod in clear sometimes, and then we pull it into those thin lines that you saw. It takes usually about an hour or so to pull a bunch of cane. And so what you saw was the tail end of that process today. All right. So Eric's got his color on. His next step is to use a stamp that he's made to stamp a rose into that big blob of glass. So he's chilling out the sides. He's trying to get the area nice and hot that he's going to be stamping onto that rose. By the way, you guys, a lot of people's glass collections start with paperweights, which is something that Eric specializes in. So if you're thinking of starting your glass collection, come by the gallery, check out some of his work. We've got a bunch of Eric's work in the gallery, and we have his work here all the time. But, you know, because it's so cool and it's so beautiful, we have a hard time keeping it in stock all the time. So we're constantly rotating through some of his really, really beautiful pieces. He brought us a fresh batch of work just yesterday, I believe. So if you're thinking about coming and starting your collection, then come by the gallery and check out some of the work that he's got in there. So if you guys blinked, you missed that one. Eric is stamped onto that mold that he had there. And his next step is going to be to reshape this big old blob of glass. And if you are an art collector and you're interested in glass being a part of your collection, Eric mentioned the Paperweight Collectors Association earlier, and that is a really amazing group. If you're interested in getting into glass collecting or you're interested in paperweights, definitely check them out. They've been super supportive of Eric's work, and Eric is a member of that group, so definitely go check them out if you're interested in collecting glass. At this stage, Eric is going through a process of heating the glass and slowly marbling it back together. When he stamped the glass on that rose stamp, it kind of pushed a bunch of color up into that clear. And now his goal is going to be to kind of clean all that up. You guys can see the rose petals have kind of formed in there. And he's going ahead and cutting off that back end to clean it up. Right. Eric's added a little bit of air into that blob of glass just to make sure that that bubble is still in there and we haven't compressed it down too far. And then I believe he's planning on adding some leaves. Right. So Eric's using the torch to selectively get rid of some excessive clear that's on the end, heating it, pinching the glass, and pulling it away. And then cutting it away with the diamond shears. All right, so Eric's gonna shape that up a little bit, heat it up, and then pick up some leaves on the end there for that rose. The leaves were prepared ahead of time and then heated up in that pickup box just to add to the bottom of that rose shape that he's got. From here, he's cleaning it up using the block we saw him use earlier. And I believe the plan is to gather over that one more time. So again, making sure that bubble is a little bit inflated, ever so slightly, so we don't lose it. Of course, every so often you've got to show off what you're making, because those of you who are watching live get a really, really great viewpoint, but sometimes it's hard to see the details in person. Don't forget, you guys, we do this on the second Friday of every month. So if you're interested in seeing some live glass blowing demonstrations, definitely come check us out. It's totally free to the public, and we bring out all sorts of different artists who work with all sorts of different processes. That looks so good. All right. Next step is getting a nice layer of clear over everything. We've done our color of application. And Eric wants to keep this nice and thick, so we're adding a little layer of clear to the outside. And from here, he can do his final shaping. So we're gonna see him block it using that block into a nice big Q-tip shape. Those blocks are really amazing tools, by the way. We keep them wet. You can see him dunk it into a bucket of water back there. And then the glass actually rides on a thin layer of steam. And that protects the wood from getting burned up too fast. It's similar to how newspaper works in this studio, and people love that we use newspaper quite a bit in our studios. The newspaper as well, really nice way to get your hand really, really close to the glass without burning yourself. But we keep it soaked in water to make sure that that glass is riding on a thin layer of steam, and that prolongs the use of that newspaper too. Of course, without water, the newspaper would just burn. All right, so from here, the process is going to be kind of blowing it out, but keeping that bottom nice and thick. Remember that Eric is going for a very thick bottomed vessel, almost like a paperweight on the bottom, but with a thinner lid. In order to do that, he's got to very much control the way that he blows this out. So you'll see that Eric has got a hose attached to the end of that blowpipe. That's going to allow for him to inflate this by himself. He's shaping the glass with the newspaper. You can see it kind of cupping into his hand. And as he's rolling and cooling the glass and shaping the glass, he is also blowing into it to inflate that bubble. Now we know that Eric is trying to thin out the lip of the vessel, so you're going to see him heat up this area that he's torching. And he's going to try to keep that area with the rose nice and thick. We don't want to blow it out and distort it too much. So you guys, one of the things that I know our glassmakers, all of the artists that work with us tend to make it seem like this is very, very easy to do. When you guys come take a class, you'll notice that it is kind of tricky. There's a lot of different moving parts at the same time, and you got to be able to do multiple things at once. If you are taking an intro class and you've never done this before, our goal is your success. So when you come in, we generally have like pretty good success rate. We want to make sure you walk away with something pretty amazing. So we've got a bunch of amazing instructors on staff, and even though this is kind of hard to learn when you are first starting, we tend to make people pretty happy over here. So come take your first class with us. If you haven't tried this yet, I mean, I'm hoping that this is on your bucket list because it's pretty amazing. If you've never done glassmaking before, come and try it out. You won't regret it. So Eric's got to stretch and heat out that area where he wants the lip of the vessel to be thin. Now, we're working with a bubble form here, and those of you who haven't really seen glassmaking before, you're probably wondering, what vessel form? That's a bubble. That's just a big old blob of glass. What we are working with right now is the bottom of the vessel. So Eric is focused on shaping up the bottom of the bowl, where he's got that flower in there. That's going to end up being the bottom. So you'll notice that he's giving it a little bit of a flat area. That's where it will sit on the table. That constriction that you see, the area where he is torching right now, will actually end up being the lip of the vessel. So he's making this into a bowl shape. And when we flip this around, you're going to see that that vessel is hollow on the inside, and we're going to change its shape from there. So we're doing this in many different stages. We're taking a few different steps as we're working with this glass. So you'll notice that Eric is heating it in the reheating chamber, going back to the bench, torching it a little bit, blowing a little bit. Very much careful control of what he needs the glass to do. So the jacks are used to make a constriction. In order to break the glass free from that blowpipe, we've got to give it a line where we want it to break free. So Eric is using the jacks.
I've already torched it like 5 times on this and that.
Especially with how soft it is.
Yeah,
I'm sure those make good jobs too.
And Eric is adjusting the shape just a little bit. Putting in those jacks to make that constriction again, reinforce that jack line. rounding out that bottom. So on a day like this when it's very cold outside, this is the perfect activity, all right? So if you guys are thinking about glass blowing, come see us in the colder months. In the summer, of course, we're always here for you. However, we do shut down in the summer months because it gets a little too hot to blow glass in Texas. So this is the best time of year. And our classes book up pretty fast. So if you're thinking about getting in, book early. Eric is inspecting his shape, paying attention to whether the glass looks like what he needs it to be, and he's manipulating and changing it based on that. So Kanan is going to bring Eric a couple of gathers on a punty to make a nice foot for this vessel. We're going to take a couple of gathers of glass.
For me, so I can give it a quick block. Thank you. That would work. Yeah, that would work.
Kanan's going to take a second gather. And then we're going to give it a quick block, just to chill it out ever so slightly before it goes over to Eric as a foot. Right. So this big old blob of glass is going to eventually be the foot, the part that the bowl sits on.
Oh, no.
So Eric is shaping that up using a paddle and then the newspaper. Kind of squeeze that shape down. And that's going to make a nice thick bottom for that bowl to sit on. All right.
Pull this on. Try
Eric is using the jacks while Kanan is paddling the bottom. The paddle makes a really nice flat surface for the bowl to sit on, and the jacks create a beautiful hourglass shape. I don't know if you guys saw that change.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and let me get out of here.
The next step is punting. If you've been hanging out on our live stream for a little bit, you have already seen this done once. We're gonna do it one more time. Eric is gonna make his own punty, and Kanan is gonna maintain the temperature of that glass over there. So punty is just a big old blob of glass on the end of a steel rod. The tricky thing about a punty is it cannot be too hot, and if it is too cold, it won't stick. Now Eric's not used to working with the glass that we have in our studio, so his sense of temperature might be slightly off from the studio team that usually works here. He's adding a little bit of water to that constriction he made earlier so that he can break the piece free from the original pipe. So we're at the point now where we have basically transferred the vessel and we can address the top half of the vessel. So Eric is giving it a little bit of extra heat, really targeting the top half of the vessel so that he can open it out and change the shape of this bowl. Hopefully now, if you've never seen glassmaking before, you have picked up how we make open vessels. We always start by shaping the bottom of the vessel first, do this transfer process, and then we change the top of the vessel form. So Eric is using the jacks to slowly open up this bubble shape. The puffer helps him to inflate it a little bit, which once it's no longer on the blowpipe, the puffer is the best way to inflate or do any sort of inflation. I'm going to let Clifton take over for a little bit so he can end our broadcast, but he's going to walk you guys through the rest of the process with Eric.
All right, I'm back on the mic, and I got the camera. Thank you, Jean. I can't thank Jean enough. Jean is our visiting artist and residency coordinator. She manages all of the artist visits and makes this event possible. She's a fantastic human being, an incredible artist. And I want to shout out to Jean for all her work here at Seneca Studios. Like I said early in this broadcast, this is about relationships. Seneca Studios is about bringing people together. So we're thrilled to host Eric Hansen for tonight's demonstration. We got a great crowd here. We got some students from UTA. We got some people in the community. We got some of Eric's friends and families here. And we got the team. There's Kevin McGeehee and there's Jean. I want to shout out to Brandy, and there's Nick and Brandy's in there on the production side of things. Nice work on that side, Brandy. Thanks so much. Shout out to Kanan, who's still assisting, and Andrew has been photographing and documenting the evening all night. And Tatara Siegel was here earlier. Tatara's our education and outreach coordinator. and helps to manage all of our programming in the community. And then the boss behind all of it is Heidi Childers. I want to shout out to Heidi for all her hard work to make all of this possible, to keep this train on the rails. So all right, so Eric's wrapping up his final demonstration for the night. This signature kind of rose bowl. He's got that little rose pattern in there with some leaves in the background. He's left it real thick on the bottom, so he creates that optics. And he's going to open this up into a bowl. We'll see if he likes it enough to keep it straight, or if he'll flare it a little bit, or if he'll want to give it a little bit of movement up top. Let me come over here and see if I can get a shot straight on into the bowl. See if we can see that rose. We use wooden tools, we use metal tools, and that paper tool to help us to shape it. So as we come to the conclusion, I really want to recognize the support. Seneca Studios is a nonprofit dedicated to education, dedicated to arts and culture in Fort Worth, Texas. I want to thank the Texas Commission on the Arts. I want to thank the City of Fort Worth and the Arts Fort Worth for their support. We're located in the near South Side Cultural District, just south of downtown Fort Worth. If you've ever wanted to participate in Make Glass with us, we do all kinds of public programming. Check out our website, www.seneca.org or senecastudios.org. Near Southside Cultural District is a great area. So many wonderful places to live and work and play here at Fort Worth. We're thrilled to have been a part of helping develop this neighborhood. We've been here for 12 years, and I can confidently say that we have been an anchoring visual arts organization in this community. So, looks like Eric's liking it. He's gonna kind of let this thing cool down, even out the temperature, and then we'll break it free of the pipe and put it away into the annealing oven to cool off slow.
Sometimes they kind of blow into it, you know.
Good looking piece. Really cool demonstration tonight to see the kind of collaboration between different processes from the same artist. Usually one artist will be very proficient in either the glass blowing studio or the flame working studio, and Eric is most certainly proficient in both, and has brought them together in these demonstrations tonight, working in front of the torch and working in the furnace and here in the glass blowing studio. So again, I can't thank Eric enough for coming tonight. All part of the plan. Showing off the pattern. So when it's all said and done, we got to put it away into the annealing oven to cool off slow. So Kanan's going to suit up with some mittens and a face shield, and he's going to catch this piece. He's going to put it into the oven to cool down probably over the next 36 hours. These pieces are kind of thick. The paperweight that he put away earlier that has that clown inside was quite thick, so we don't want that to crack. So we'll cool it off extra slow. So you can see he's going to put a little drip of water on there and then tap the pipe to break it free in a nice controlled way. To fire polish that one into the oven. Several vases tonight, and it's best to put it in the back of the box. Nice work. I also want to thank Topo Chico for their support. Topo Chico has been bringing us sparkling water for some time now. Thank you, Topo Chico. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Very good. Fantastic work. Thanks so much for being here.
Enjoyed it.
It's been our pleasure, man. Yeah.
Come see Seneca.
Come see us, you guys. If you want to come and participate, we offer all kinds of programming. We're a school. We do all kinds of outreach. So the more public programming we do, the more outreach programming we can provide. So thanks for coming. One more hand for Eric Hansen, our featured artist. Yeah. And the team. It takes a team to make this happen. It takes a community to make anything happen. And so I want to thank the team, Gene and Kevin and Kanan, who's been on the pipe, helping out Brandy and Nick and Tatara. We do this all the time. Come back and see us. Yeah. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Y'all have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you again soon enough.
Watch out.